The United States has become very overextended. We're overextended militarily. If you look at the venture in the Middle East, it has been really disastrous for American prestige and really for American strength. The war in Ukraine would never have happened had the United States not pressed NATO to move aggressively, to expand to the east, and then in 2014, the Central Intelligence Agency and British MI6 intelligence staged a coup that overthrew the duly elected government of Ukraine, President Yanukovych. He had been elected in a free and fair election. The Central Intelligence Agency, British MI6, overthrew the government and installed a puppet government. And that government then became extremely aggressive towards the 30% of Ukrainian citizens who spoke Russian as their first language. And because of that, in heavily Russian areas like Crimea, which had always been Russia, and the Donbass, they declared their independence. They weren't going to be governed by a revolutionary junta, which is all that they had in the capital of Kiev. And so had it not been for that coup, the war never would have happened. And then there were the Minsk agreements. The Minsk agreements were designed to give some autonomy to the republics of the Donbass and to calm down the war, but Ukraine never followed the Minsk agreements, and they conducted a major war against the Russian-speaking people right on the border of Russia. And they killed, well, in all there were 14,000 people killed. I can't give you the breakdown, Russian versus Ukrainian, but this was a very serious problem. And then in late 2021, President Putin and Mr. Lavrov put forward specific written peace proposals to calm down the whole area of Eastern Europe and to secure a peace. And they were just brushed aside by NATO, because NATO was pushing. They were trying to entrap Russia. They were forcing Russia into war to where Russia had no choice. Russia could not allow NATO to expand right to the border of their country. And so it was with great reluctance that President Putin ordered the attack. And he had delayed until the ground was thawing in the Ukraine, which made it difficult for tanks to maneuver because the ground had become soft. But he took that risk because he was so desperately trying to advance peace and to achieve a peace agreement with NATO. And they just brushed it off because they knew they were forcing him into war. They did it deliberately. They did it intentionally. They did it with an intent to create a bloody war between Ukraine and Russia. Now, as the war is unfolding, there was this tremendous war hysteria created, and it has begun to crumble. And part of it is that there are people like me who are speaking out and explaining the background, because Americans didn't understand the background of why Russia was forced into this war. And as this is happening, and as the Russian army is very, very successful in the Donbass, it's beginning to look as though Russia has won the war. Now, they have a lot of fighting to do ahead of them, but It appears that that the Ukrainian forces are collapsing in the Donbass pocket, and that it is inevitable. They're beginning to retreat, and once they retreat, it's not clear where there will be a hard line of resistance from there on. So Russia is winning the war, and all of a sudden, within the New York Times, the Washington Post, now the Wall Street Journal, there's a realization that NATO has embarked on an enormously risky venture. And of course, NATO is an agency of the United States. It's not going to move without U.S. Guidance. And so there is now this sudden recognition, wait a minute, we're not only are we not winning this war against Russia, NATO winning the war against Russia, but now the people who are promoting the war have become so insanely reckless that they've toyed with the idea of nuclear weapons and actually putting NATO forces on the ground. And I think, to their credit, I never agree with the New York Times or the Post, but I do agree with them now that the risk of something going wrong is so tremendous, and the threat of a cataclysmic war between the two great nuclear superpowers of the world is so devastating that only a madman would contemplate attempting to walk the edge of the cliff and see whether they're going to fall and take all the rest of us with them. So there is some sanity that is returning to the Western press. I think that's very positive. And I think, once the United States decides to give Zelensky directions that it's time for peace, there will be peace. It's that clear. He has a voice, but this is a guy who was he was dancing around with a bunch of gay fellows in ladies' high heels and stuff. He's not a serious human being. He's a creation of the Western media, nothing more, nothing more. So when he's told it's time, he's going to do what he's told, because if he doesn't, he'll find out what's good for him. But anyway, I think as this is unfolding, I hope there is a new realization that this bellicose attitude towards the world it's not consistent with the way that we've functioned in the past. I mean, some people could reasonably disagree, but I think we were more balanced. Back during the days of the Soviet Union, we had tremendous tensions on both sides. There was plenty that I would have complained about the Soviet Union in those days. I certainly did. But Russia is not the Soviet Union. Russia is a totally different nation. Soviet Union was an officially atheist nation. Russia today has become one of the most staunchly Christian nations. Strong moral values, strong family values, respect for marriage, things that are becoming eroded in Western civilization are being strengthened in Russia. And I think that the strength of character is playing out with the way that the Russian people have dealt with this war. Is they understand that it's a moral imperative. They do not want to be subservient to some organization in Brussels that tells them who they can have as immigrants and tells them what policies they have to have about marriage, and people can form these strange marriage relationships that are very unnatural. They don't accept that in Russia. Russians have the traditional common sense and good decency to reject that stuff. So I'm really I love my country. I've fought for it. I bled, and I bled until I was lying unconscious in the hot sun of Vietnam, so it's not as though I'm not a left winger. I'm a Republican. I'm a very conservative Republican, but I disagree entirely with the foreign policy. I would go off and I would defend my country to the death. But we're not talking about my country. We're talking about Russia's country. Russians are prepared to go off and to defend their country to the death. If I were a Russian, I would say, yes, okay, we have an existential threat on our border. I'll fight. I respect that. And let me say, it breaks my heart to see every single Ukrainian soldier or civilian who's killed, and it breaks my heart to see every single Russian soldier who is killed, and few civilians also. I cannot tell you how many times I have crossed myself when I've looked at pictures of Ukrainians or of Russians. I don't want to see them die. They're dying for the glory of the one world order, for the glory of NATO power, but not for the glory of the people, not for, Ukrainians are not dying for Ukraine, they're dying for NATO, they're dying for the one world order. Russians are dying for Russia.